It started with a scream that shattered the silence of Oak Hill Cemetery in Boston. The kind of scream that tears through a person's throat when reality becomes too heavy to carry. James Carter, tech mogul worth $3.2 billion, collapsed to his knees before a gravestone bearing his daughter's name, his designer suit soaking in the wet grass. But then, cutting through his anguish, came a small, innocent voice. "Excuse me, Mr. That girl. She taught me how to draw butterflies just last week." James's head snapped up so fast his neck cracked. His daughter Emma had been gone for 5 months. What began as an impossible encounter between a devastated father and a peculiar child would unravel mysteries that defied explanation. A clandestine friendship, a message left behind, and a revelation so profound it would transform a man who believed he had nothing left to live for. Keep watching, because what this billionaire uncovers will show you that presence, compassion, and the courage to start again are worth infinitely more than any fortune. Oak Hill Cemetery stretched out beneath a gray October sky, the kind of afternoon where even the birds seemed reluctant to sing. James Carter stood motionless, his shadow long across the freshly tended grass surrounding Emma Carter's resting place. 5 months since the funeral, yet the wound felt as fresh as the morning they lowered her small casket into the earth. His $5,000 Tom Ford suit seemed obscene in this place of sorrow, and somewhere deep in his fractured heart, he knew he didn't deserve to be here. He was placing a bouquet of purple tulips, her favorites, when the voice pierced his grief. "Excuse me, Mr. That girl. She taught me how to draw butterflies just last week." James turned slowly, his body moving like rusted machinery. A child, perhaps 10 years old, stood 3 feet away, clutching a sketchbook against her chest. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her denim jacket patched at the elbows, her sneakers held together with duct tape. But her eyes, those gentle brown eyes, held a certainty that made James's blood run cold. "Repeat what you just said." His voice came out like gravel scraping concrete. The girl didn't retreat. "That girl," she said, pointing to the photograph embedded in the marble headstone. "Emma, that was her name, right? We drew pictures together last week. She showed me how to make the wings look like they're actually flying." James felt the earth tilt beneath him. Impossible. Emma had spent her final 8 months in Boston Children's Hospital battling neuroblastoma. She hadn't been strong enough to leave her room, let alone meet strange children in parks. "You're mistaken." His tone was sharp, defensive. "My daughter was hospitalized. She couldn't have met you. She couldn't have done anything." The girl's expression shifted, a flicker of sadness crossing her young face. "She wore a red scarf," the girl continued quietly. "Said it belonged to her grandmother from Paris. She tied it around her head because she said she didn't like how the medicine made her hair fall out. But she told me she felt like an artist when she wore it, like someone in a painting." James's legs nearly gave out. The red Hermes scarf. It had disappeared from Emma's hospital room 3 months before she died. The nurses searched everywhere. And Emma's words, those exact words about feeling like someone in a painting, she had whispered them to him one night when he actually stayed past visiting hours. "Who put you up to this?" James demanded, his voice rising. "What kind of sick person sends a child to torment a grieving father?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Nobody sent me, sir. I don't even know who you are. I just saw on the news that Emma passed away, and I needed to come say goodbye. My name is Sophie Rivera. Emma was my friend." James felt something crack inside his chest. "My daughter couldn't have been your friend. She was at Boston Children's Hospital nearly every single day." Sophie hesitated, then spoke carefully. "She told me about a silver bracelet you wear. Said it has coordinates engraved on it, the place where you proposed to her mom. She said you never take it off, not even in the shower." James's hand instinctively moved to his wrist. The custom Cartier bracelet pressed against his pulse, the coordinates of Martha's Vineyard etched into the platinum. 41.3896 north, 70.6437 west. Only 4 people knew the significance of those numbers: James, his ex-wife Catherine, Emma, and the jeweler who made it. The world seemed to dissolve around him. His vision blurred. He sank onto the damp ground, his expensive trousers ruined, But nothing mattered anymore. Nothing made sense. Sophie knelt beside him, uncertain and frightened. She spoke about you constantly, the girl whispered. Said her father creates technology that connects the whole world. She was so proud of you, mister. She really was. James couldn't breathe. For 5 months, he had buried himself in algorithms and board meetings and product launches, telling himself it was what Emma would have wanted. But now her voice echoed in his memory. Every pleading look he had ignored. Every time she asked him to stay just a little longer. How long were you two friends? James managed to whisper. About 8 months, Sophie replied softly. She used to come to Harborside Gardens after her morning treatments. At first, she just sat on the bench near the fountain, watching me sketch. One day I asked if she wanted to try, and her whole face lit up like I'd handed her the moon itself. James pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to stop the tears. 8 months. The exact same 8 months when he was launching Carter Tech's newest software platform, flying between Silicon Valley and New York, convincing himself that building an empire was how you provided for your child. He remembered Catherine mentioning that Emma's treatment had shifted to outpatient status. He hadn't asked questions. Questions required time he convinced himself he didn't have. What else did she share with you? Sophie reached into her jacket pocket carefully. She always carried this with her. She never showed it to me directly, but once it fell out of her bag. A photograph of a man, a woman, and a little girl on a beach, all 3 of them laughing in the surf. She told me it was from back when her family still felt whole. James recognized it instantly. Cape Cod 7 years ago, before the diagnosis, before he became a phantom who haunted conference rooms instead of reading bedtime stories. Why are you telling me all this? James's voice fractured into pieces. Because she asked me to promise, Sophie said, her own voice trembling now. She said if anything ever happened to her, I had to find her dad. She wanted me to tell you she wasn't angry. She wanted me to say she understood why you stayed away. And she wanted you to know the afternoons at the gardens were the most beautiful moments of her entire life. James released a sound that belonged to a wounded animal. It was grief finally breaking free after months of being locked behind boardroom doors and quarterly earnings reports. Sophie hesitated, then placed her small hand on the billionaire's shaking shoulder, offering the simple human kindness that no shareholder or executive had dared to give him. Hidden behind a stone monument 20 feet away, Maria Rivera watched in silence, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. She hadn't anticipated this when Sophie begged her to visit the cemetery. She only wanted to let her daughter say a proper farewell. Now she was witnessing James Carter, the man whose face graced the cover of Wired and Forbes, broken and weeping over his child's grave. But Maria carried another secret, something neither the man nor her daughter yet understood. Emma had left something behind, something that would soon demolish what remained of James's carefully constructed world and slowly rebuild it into something unrecognizable. Thanks for watching. Before we continue, we'd love to hear from you. If someone told you they'd met your child after their death, would you believe them? Could you? Do you think Emma's spirit somehow found a way to reach her father through Sophie? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The next 4 days passed in a fog. James Carter couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything except his daughter's photograph and the impossible story a strange girl had told him. His silver bracelet felt heavier on his wrist, like it was pulling him toward something he couldn't name. His head of security called after just 20 hours, the kind of rapid response only unlimited resources could purchase. But this time the information didn't bring power or control. It brought devastation wrapped in a manila folder. Sophie Rivera, age 10, daughter of Maria Rivera, a custodian at Boston Children's Hospital. Single mother, spotless record, lived with her daughter in Riverside Apartments, a deteriorating complex in the city's eastern district. James didn't wait for additional details. He needed truth, not another sanitized report from people paid to tell him what he wanted to hear. The Tesla drew stares as it rolled through the narrow streets lined with rusting fire escapes and faded murals. For the first time in years, James felt vulnerable. He wasn't the commanding tech genius here. He was an intruder in a world where his wealth meant absolutely nothing. He stopped in front of a scarred door marked Apartment 4B. His hand shook as he knocked, the sound echoing through the hallway. The door opened to reveal Maria, a woman in her late 30s wearing her hospital custodian uniform. Hair pulled into a practical bun, eyes deep and exhausted yet somehow peaceful. She wasn't the type of beauty James was accustomed to, the kind that came with Fashion Week invitations and champagne receptions. But there was something authentic about her, something that unsettled him completely. "Mr. Carter," she said calmly, "I wondered if you'd come. Sophie mentioned you might." "I need to speak with your daughter," James said. Too abrupt, too cold, too much like the CEO he'd been for too long. Maria didn't budge. "My daughter already shared the truth with you." James ran a hand through his uncombed hair. "I just need to understand who my daughter really was." Something shifted in Maria's expression, a softening around her tired eyes. She stepped aside carefully. "Then you should come inside." The apartment was tiny but immaculate. Every surface gleamed. Every object had its designated place. A worn sofa, a second-hand table serving double duty as a desk. Photographs of Maria and Sophie taped to the wall captured moments of happiness despite financial struggle. "Please sit," Maria said quietly. "Sophie's at school right now, but I think you need to see this." She opened a drawer in the small kitchen and pulled out an envelope, aged and wrinkled, sealed with the word Daddy written in shaky child handwriting. James's knees nearly buckled beneath him. "Where did you get that?" "Your daughter gave it to me," Maria said softly. "She made me swear to keep it safe and to deliver it to you only if someone came searching for her after she was no longer here." James stared at the letter as if it might burn through his skin. "Why didn't you bring it to me sooner?" Maria met his gaze with quiet understanding. "Because you weren't ready to receive it." The envelope remained sealed for 5 days. James carried it everywhere. In his suit pocket during investor calls he couldn't focus on his nightstand during sleepless nights, in his messenger bag on cross-country flights where he stared at clouds but saw nothing. When he finally opened it, it wasn't in a moment of calm. It was in a hurricane. It began when Catherine entered his downtown office late one evening, her heels striking the hardwood floor like hammer blows. "James, your assistant tells me you've canceled 20 meetings this week," she said sharply. "The board is panicking." "I'm panicking." James looked up from the envelope trembling in his hands. "Did you know?" he asked quietly. Catherine froze completely. "Know what?" "About the gardens. About Sophie. About how Emma was sneaking away from treatments to draw pictures." Her silence answered everything. James stood so violently his chair crashed backward. "You knew. You knew and never thought to tell me." Tears welled in her eyes. "Because you would have stopped her, James. You would have turned those final months into a prison cell." She was dying. And for once, for just a few precious hours each week, she was alive. For once, she wasn't your project or your obligation or your reason to build a bigger company. She was just a child being a child. "I loved her," James shouted, his voice shattering. "You loved your empire," Catherine fired back. "You gave her every material thing except the one thing she actually needed. You." The envelope in James's hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He tore it open, his hands shaking so badly he almost ripped the letter inside. "Daddy, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hope you're not mad about the gardens. I needed those afternoons more than I needed anything else. Everyone at the hospital stared at me like I was already a ghost. At home, everything was so quiet and careful, like everyone was afraid to wake the dying girl in the next room. But at the gardens, I got to laugh. The other kids yelled when I messed up a drawing. They treated me like a normal person. I wasn't sick there. I was just Emma. I know you work so hard because you love me. Mom says you build things when you're scared of losing control. But sometimes I wished you'd build something with me, even just a blanket fort. You didn't need to give me the world, Daddy. I just wanted you in it. When you look at your bracelet, please don't feel sad. Those coordinates are my favorite numbers because they represent when you and Mom were happy. Please take care of Sophie. She's gentle and kind. She'll need someone like you in her life. Maybe you could go to the gardens with her. Do the things you ran out of time to do with me. I love you, Daddy. I always will. Emma." The words blurred through James's tears. His chest felt like it was collapsing inward. The weight of years, of missed dance recitals and forgotten bedtime stories and broken promises. All of it crushed him at once. Catherine stood silently as he wept, a broken man finally feeling everything he'd been too busy to feel. Then she whispered, "I'm filing for divorce next week. You're finally becoming the person I always hoped you'd be, James. But it's too late for us. It's been too late for a long time." James didn't try to stop her when she walked out. For once, he didn't chase something he'd already destroyed beyond repair. That night, alone in the dark, he whispered to his daughter's memory, "I can't undo the past, Emma. But I swear to you, I'll honor you. I'll find that girl. I'll find Sophie." The next morning, James stood outside Riverside Apartments again, dressed not in Armani, but in jeans and a plain sweater. He looked human for the first time in years. When Maria opened the door, her surprise melted into quiet understanding. "I need your help," James said simply. "Emma asked me to look after Sophie. I can't just transfer money and call it done. I need to understand what she loved so much about those gardens." Maria studied him carefully, seeing not the billionaire tech mogul, but a father finally stripped of his armor. Then she nodded slowly. "Harborside Gardens. 3:30 tomorrow afternoon. And Mr. Carter, no designer clothes. The kids will eat you alive." For the first time in months, James felt the corner of his mouth lift into something resembling a smile. "Thanks for watching. Before we continue, we need to know, if you were James, could you bear to read the letter your child left behind? Or would the fear be too overwhelming? Tell us in the comments." By 3:15 the following afternoon, the autumn sun cast golden light across Harborside Gardens, and for the first time in decades, James Carter wasn't in a boardroom or behind tinted car windows. He was standing on a patch of uneven grass in worn jeans and sneakers that felt foreign on his feet. Children were already scattered across the small green space, laughing, arguing, sketching on oversized pads of paper, playing tag between the benches. When Sophie Rivera spotted him, her crayon froze mid-stroke. Every child turned to stare. James suddenly felt enormous and completely out of place. Hello, Sophie," he said awkwardly. "Your mother mentioned you might show me how to draw the way you showed Emma." His daughter's name hung in the air like a prayer whispered in a cathedral. Sophie blinked twice, then offered a small smile. "You can try, but fair warning, you'll probably be terrible at first." That was Emma's spot under the willow tree. The children erupted into giggles when James agreed. Within minutes, he was attempting to sketch a butterfly and failing spectacularly. His lines were crooked, his proportions absurd, and for the first time in years he laughed. Not the calculated, measured laugh of a man closing a deal, but a genuine, unguarded sound that made the children laugh even harder. Maria watched from a bench beneath the willow tree where Emma once rested, a thermos of homemade lemonade beside her. When James finally set down his pencil, breathless and humbled, she walked over and handed him a cup. "Not quite as glamorous as your product launches, I imagine," she teased gently. James took a sip, still catching his breath. "It's better," he admitted. "Honestly, it's real in a way I'd forgotten existed." Their eyes met, two people from completely different worlds, connected by the memory of one girl who had changed them both. "Emma was right," James whispered, then said more clearly, "My daughter was right. The small moments are what actually matter. I just had to lose everything to finally understand." Maria didn't soften her response. "Then don't waste what you've learned, James. Emma's gone. But Sophie's here. These children are here. You still have the chance to show up for someone." He nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right. I've spent my entire life building technology that connects the world. Now I want to build something that connects hearts." Weeks turned into months, and James did exactly that. He rescheduled board meetings, delegated projects, and showed up again and again at Harborside Gardens. He didn't arrive as a billionaire. He came as James, the man who still couldn't draw a decent flower, but always brought art supplies and listened. He learned about the children. David, who dreamed of becoming a marine biologist. Jasmine, who cared for her disabled grandfather. And Leo, who rarely spoke but had eyes that seemed to understand everything. James didn't throw money at problems. Instead, he gave time helping with homework, attending school events, simply being present. Even his company, Carter Technologies, began to transform. No more mandatory 60-hour work weeks. No more emails after 7 p.m. Generous parental leave. Family first policies. On-site childcare. Some board members called him insane. James called it redemption. As for Maria, she became part of his life in ways neither had anticipated. They began having coffee after the garden meetups, talking until the street lamps flickered to life. She told him about her husband who died in a construction accident, about raising Sophie alone while working overnight shifts. He told her about the emptiness that accompanied wealth and the silence that echoed through his penthouse after Emma's death. One evening, as the sky turned deep purple, James said quietly, "I don't know what this is between us, Maria, but when I'm with you and Sophie, I feel like I finally belong somewhere real." Maria looked at him for a long moment, then smiled gently. "Maybe that's because you finally stopped building walls around yourself." 20 months later, Harborside Gardens looked transformed. New benches donated anonymously, fresh flowers planted seasonally, laughter that never seemed to fade. Sophie, now the assistant coordinator of the youth art program, called out activities with growing confidence. James still participated, still terrible at drawing, still proud of every crooked line. Then one Saturday afternoon, a small girl with a bandana covering her head stood at the edge of the garden, watching shyly. Her name was Lily, and her mother whispered that she was undergoing treatment at Boston Children's, the same hospital where Emma had spent her final days. James crouched down to her level. "Hey there, would you like to join us?" Lily hesitated. "I'm not very good at art, and I get tired really easily." "Perfect," James smiled warmly. "You'll fit right in. Our instructor's terrible at drawing too." The children laughed. Sophie handed Lily a sketchbook. "We'll teach you," she said kindly, the same words she once offered Emma years ago. As James watched the girl join the circle, something shifted deep inside him. He saw glimpses of Emma in every movement, every tentative smile, every burst of unexpected joy. It didn't hurt anymore. It healed. Weeks later, Lily started coming to the hospital less frequently. She spent more afternoons at the gardens instead. And when James heard the sound of children's laughter echo across the green space, he realized that his daughter's spirit lived there in every joyful sound, in every shared moment of kindness. 4 years after Emma's passing, Harborside Gardens had become something extraordinary, a full youth community center funded quietly by James and managed by Maria. A small bronze plaque at the entrance read, "In loving memory of Emma Carter, who taught us that true wealth is measured in presence." That morning, James stood beside Maria, both holding coffee cups, watching the early arrivals. He was older now, more gray visible at his temples, fewer business suits, but his eyes were truly alive for the first time in decades. "Are you nervous?" Maria asked softly. "Always," he chuckled. "Our program launches officially today." She smiled, her hand finding his. They had married in that very garden 8 months earlier, surrounded by the children who had become their extended family. Even Catherine had attended with her new partner, a kind pediatric nurse. There was no bitterness anymore, just gratitude for the paths that had led them all here. "Dad," Sophie called from across the garden. "We need someone to demonstrate the worst possible way to draw a tree." James looked at Maria. She nodded with a knowing smile. "Go on. Your daughter's waiting." He jogged toward the easel where a new boy, Thomas, just 9 years old and still weak from chemotherapy, stood nervously holding a paintbrush. James knelt beside him. "You don't need to be talented to create art, kid. You just need to be brave enough to try." Thomas smiled. "Like you?" James's voice softened. "Exactly like me." When the program began, the garden filled with laughter, music, and golden sunlight. James created the most lopsided tree anyone had ever seen, of course, but when Thomas painted his first sunset, the children erupted in applause, lifting him onto their shoulders. James turned toward Maria. She was crying and smiling simultaneously. That night, James opened the old journal he had discovered among Emma's belongings. On the final page, he wrote carefully, "Emma, Today, another child smiled because of you. I think you'd love this community. I think you'd be proud of the man I've finally become. Thank you for teaching me how to truly live. I love you, sweetheart. Always will." He closed the journal and placed it beside the silver bracelet on his nightstand. When he touched the coordinates engraved in the metal, warmth spread through his chest. The numbers no longer reminded him of what he'd lost. They reminded him of what he'd found: a family, a purpose, and the courage to love again without fear. Did this story touch your heart? Which moment resonated most deeply? When James read Emma's letter, or when he learned to laugh again in the gardens? If the story moved you, comment 100 below and tell us which country you're watching from. And please share, and spread the story so more people remember what truly matters in life: presence, compassion, and cherishing those we love while we still have time.